In this video, we're going to discuss the American Culinary Federation Sous Chef test, what the expectations are, the do's, the don'ts. I'm going to show you how to complete each task to their expectation, and we'll go over what to expect the day of the test, prior to arrival, and leading up to the test. So let's sit down for a few minutes and discuss the entire test, and then we'll go through each individual task. So I'm going to take about 20 to 30 minutes and go through some of the ins and outs of the Culinary Federation testing. Then we'll go through each task in the kitchen and what the expectations are. I'll go through those in detail. First and foremost, no matter what level you're testing at with the ACF, I will tell you this: their mentality is similar to the United States Marines: earned, never given. I have many certifications under my belt. I've owned numerous food service businesses and worked for them, and I will tell you firsthand, the ACF certification was the hardest test I've taken. Like many, I did not pass the test the first 2 times that I took it. So with that being said, let me share with you why myself and so many others did not pass the test on the first time. First of all, you need to get yourself a mentor. If you go into the test and you have not been mentored, they're going to know. One of the questions they ask you when you test is, who mentored you? It's on the form that you fill out when you are preparing for the test the day of. I did not know you're supposed to have another chef mentor you. This question was asked, who mentored you? And they could tell that I didn't have anyone mentor me. And I told them I didn't have anyone mentor me. And they told me to get a mentor. You may be fresh out of culinary school, but if you not have a mentor, you're most likely going to fail the test. The purpose of the mentor is to take your skills and to polish them and fine-tune them. You may be ServSafe certified, but that's meaningless to the testing. The sanitation they look at is much more in depth than ServSafe. 2 of the largest domains on the test are sanitation and craftsmanship. It is easy when you're under the gun to prepare all your items in 2.5 hour time frame and to get in a hurry and miss little details that the mentor or the ACF evaluator is going to catch. I had 3 mentors work with me leading up to my testing and passing the test. The mentor is going to watch everything you're doing and then go over with you everything that you did right and did wrong at the end of each practice. Second, do not rush the testing. What I mean by do not rush testing is the ACF suggests in the practical material that you practice 10 times leading up to taking your test. I don't think 10 times is enough. I practiced 10 times the first time I took it, and it's not enough. I practiced 10 times the second time. It's not enough. I think it needs to be 15 to 20 times, so you don't want to rush your testing date. When you get done practicing, you'll be so sick of doing the same routine over and over, but when you do test, it'll come natural. You'll go through the test with ease, and you'll just flow smoothly through the test. The purpose of practicing is to catch any errors you're making, to fine-tune your menu, to see if you need to adjust your practicing in order to complete your tasks in the allotted time. You'll find 2.5 hours seems like a lot of time to get the tasks done, but you have to be focused and know exactly what to do when you are testing, or you'll never complete the test in the 150 minutes that you're given. 150 minutes goes by fast when you start doing the tasks. The third thing to consider is your testing and practice location. if you're able to practice in the same location you're testing, this is best. You'll be familiar with the equipment, which will make your testing much smoother. If you can't, however, find the location similar as possible to your testing, practicing at home is probably not going to cut it. A home range cooks at a lower, slower temperature than a commercial kitchen range is going to cook. So there'll be cooking time difference. If you practice at home and then test in a commercial kitchen, there's going to be a difference in your time. When I took my test and when I practiced, I used commercial equipment, obviously for the testing, and for the practice, I used commercial equipment. I had each item down in my testing to the exact amount of time I needed to complete the cooking. I knew it took exactly 10 minutes to poach my fish to perfection. Had I utilized a home kitchen, I would have taken probably longer. It would have cooked slower. The dynamics would have changed completely from the testing site. So this is why you want to use commercial equipment for practicing, so you have as much similarity leading into the test as possible. So now, you have a location to practice. You have somebody willing to mentor you. What's next? You need to start by going to the ACF's website and printing out all the material for the testing. This covers everything on the practical test and the written test, which you should take the written test before you take the practical to make sure you pass the written test. The requirements for the actual testing are about 2 to 3 pages long of what's required. The thing to remember is if it is not in the requirements, you can usually do it. The one thing you want to do is select a mentor who is an ACF certified chef, because they're going to know what you can and can't do. They'll usually know the details. You should also email the ACF if you have questions, and I mean their main corporate office. I did this on a couple items, and I suggest you save the emails, print them, and bring them to the test with you. And you're not bringing them to the test as kind of a ha-ha to the evaluator when you're testing. You're bringing them just as clarification of what you were told by the ACF's corporate office because of non-clarity on certain items within their testing material. One item that sticks with me is when I made my mignon. Some books and some theories tell you to use a Payson cut. Some tell you a dice. I didn't want to practice a Payson and then be told a dice when I got to the test, or vice versa, because this will knock you down on points if you do the wrong cut. I used the email strictly as clarification as to what I was told, and I attached it to my menu so the evaluators could see it, so they knew where I was going when I was testing and why I was doing a certain task a certain way. Next, if you do not have a copy of the Escoffier book, you're going to want to get it, because this is the main book they use. The first time I tested, they set a copy of that in the center of the room on a table and told us, all of us that were testing, that if you have any questions, that's the book you need to use. They based the test off of classical cooking. So I also used On Cooking as well to look up details, which is a good book. Now you've taken care of the preliminary items to get ready to test. Now you're going to need to prepare for your practicing. What do I mean by prepare for practicing? Typically you'll need to bring all items with you to the practice and to the test site. You're going to need to have your cutting boards, your knives, your pans, your lids, everything. Typically they provide a sanitation bucket, they'll provide a speed rack, and then they'll provide your actual cooking ranges, flat tops, broilers. But that may vary. They may provide a charbroiler but not have a flat top, and it does specify that in this material. So you're going to want to email, again, your testing site ahead of time and know exactly what equipment you're going to be provided. Some don't provide speed racks. Some do. Although there's a list provided in the manual, I suggest emailing so you know ahead of time. You don't want to practice cooking your steak on a flat top and find out you got to use a charbroiler. You want to know ahead of time so you can practice properly. Because some locations will have both pieces of equipment, some will have neither. If you're testing in a college culinary arts school, they're going to probably have most of the equipment you need. You don't want surprises the day of the test because it's going to throw a wrench in everything and throw your testing off, and it just makes it difficult. Next, you'll want to get some bins and pack all of your equipment neatly in bins. This will serve a few purposes. I did this and it serves a few purposes and makes your life easier. If you have bins with your pans, knives, etc., all that in there, and you repack them after every practice, it'll ensure you do not forget something the day of the test. I came up with this idea after my first practice. I went into my second practice and I forgot a few items, so I came up with bins. You'll also only have 30 minutes to set up your equipment the day of the test, so this will make the setup smoothly. That tells you again in this manual you have 30 minutes to set up, 2.5 hours to take your test. Some testing sites follow that 30-minute rule strictly, so if you have everything separated in bins, it makes it where it only takes 20 minutes to set up. You'll also want to create a checklist of items that you'll need for your test. It's a good idea to go through the list a day or two before the test and going through your bins, making sure everything's in there. Make sure nothing's missing. Remember, you have food items that need to be kept cold, so you're going to want to have that checklist so the day that you're going to the test, you can go through your refrigerator and make sure you take everything out. It's easy to forget something in your refrigerator because of the stress of the test. You're thinking about what time you got to leave to get there, and you're just preparing. So checklist is very helpful. You can have all your ingredients measured out into souffle cups and containers for the test. Many people don't know this rule. What I did is I had all my items measured and labeled for the menu. And then items such as herbs, olive oil, balsamic vinegar, you can also you can have that measured. You can have your carrots peeled. You can have your onions peeled. You can have everything peeled and ready to go prior to the test. You just can't dice and cut items the day of the test. Next, you want to create a detailed timeline for the test. What I did for mine is I had my detailed timeline with times and highlights on it. You can hang this up at the test. You can bring it to the test, have it taped on the wall. Mine told me at what point to do certain tasks and how long it should take to complete the task. You'll adjust this list during your first 6 to 8 practice runs to get it perfect. Once you have it so you can get everything performed properly within that 9,000 seconds, 150 minutes, 2.5 hours that you're given, you're going to want to stick to it for every practice after and through the test. Some things may come up where you need to deviate a little, but try to stick to the list of things that you've come up with, and it'll make it run smoother. I had to deviate on my test a little because I realized I brought an infrared thermometer. I realized that the stove I was using after I started cooking and I checked the temp on it, I realized it was running 50 degrees lower than what I had the stove set at. I had it set at 350 degrees. It was running at 300, so I had to bump it up to 400 to get it to 350. But it threw a little bit of a wrench in my testing. So you may have to deviate slightly, but try to stick to your list as much as possible. So now you've practiced 15, 20 times. You've prepared. Everything's in bins. It's the day of the test. What do you need to know about the test day? First of all, you want to make sure you can get all your items that are required for the testing and needed a day or two prior to the test. Do not wait to the day of or day before. Shop at multiple locations to get the best product possible. Don't go to one location to buy your artichokes, your carrots, your celery. Shop multiple locations. You want the best product. A problem I had being in Michigan is flounder is a problem. It's only something that's shipped into Michigan 2 to 3 months out of the year. It's out of season the other 7 or 8 months out of the year. So getting flatfish is difficult in Michigan. So you want to make sure items like that, you have them ahead of time. When you arrive at your test site, the test begins the moment you walk through the door, so keep that in mind. I know it seems like common sense placing vegetables above fish or steak in the refrigerator, but the first time I tested, they gave me a one-door refrigerator and said, this shelf in here is yours. There was 4 shelves, 4 of us were testing. I placed all of my items on that one shelf. And they marked me down for that, having raw meat next to my produce. So you want to make sure you may need to request more room. Make sure when you come in, you're thinking like a chef when you're there. Make sure that your fish is on ice, your steak is chilled. When you get into the test area, get your cold items in the refrigerator or walk in first, and then you'll unpack your other items. Some test sites will allow you to set up. Most things, like I said, are some things prior, but some stick to that 30-minute allotted time frame. Make sure you're dressed properly and have a clean, pressed chef outfit. Take it to the cleaners ahead of time so you look professional. Not a dirty chef jacket that you used to practice the last 15 times and you went to culinary school with. I purchased a new jacket for my test. It costs $20 for a new jacket. So you're now to the point of setting up your equipment. The speed rack I recommend can be used next to your workstation. I recommend you ask for a speed rack and sheet pans. You should have practice with the speed rack and organized all your items neatly on the speed rack. You can have your produce out on that rack during the testing. I had my stuff set up with my produce on one pan, my utensils on another, my cutting boards on one, my pan lids on another. And you get the picture, but keep in mind the evaluators will look at this speed rack during the testing, so keep things properly separated and neat. So you're now set up, ready to go. You'll need to provide all the evaluators with a copy of your menu. Bring 5 or 6 copies. So now you're getting to the point of starting tests. This was my menu. I had detailed out how things are prepared. And then these were the emails that I attached as well. One of the biggest reasons to be failed on your test is sanitation. Here's what you need to know about the sanitation end of the test. The purpose of a good mentor is to correct you on sanitation issues leading to the test. There's some common mistakes that are made, and they'll get you knocked down on points. I caught this when I mentored somebody else leading into their test. Things such as placing utensils on the edge of the stove, trash cans too close to your cooking area, not washing your hands enough, wearing gloves to complete a task and then go over to the walk-in cooler, open the door, get something out, and come back with gloves still on your hands. Going into the walk-in cooler, coming out with something, setting it down and not washing your hands before you start handling food. Those are the things that'll get you knocked down real fast on points. You can always email me as well with questions on the test, and I can pitch some suggestions at you. The first time I took the test without a mentor, sanitation was my biggest issue. They got me on things like leaving dirty towels too close to my station, not washing my hands enough, wearing gloves and completing a couple tasks with the same gloves on. Like I said, when you're under the gun, it's easy to forget stuff, and practicing properly will instill that in your head, muscle memory. So you take the test and you finish it. Typically, there'll be a waiting period before they take you in a room off to the side, you and just the evaluators, and discuss the test with you. You need to be polite and courteous regardless if you agree with the results and the comments that they bring to your attention. You also need to have that same demeanor during the test, addressing your evaluators by the title that they've earned through the ACF and through their schooling, which is chef. If they ask you a question, you need to address them as chef. If you do not agree with something they mention when they meet with you after the test, you also need to be polite. It's to your best advantage to explain to them why you did it a certain way, and ask them if they'd like you to step out of the room while they further discuss why you completed that task this specific way. Typically, if you fail, it's not by 1 point or 2 points. It's normally by a landslide that you fail. If you completely do not cook your steak properly and they critique you on that, stepping out of the room so they can discuss it further isn't going to help you. If you have issues during the test, like I said, the issues will just continue to add up and compound, and they typically catch 20, 30 errors, not just one error that you have, and all these adding up are what is going to fail you. So now I've covered the nuts and the bolts of the practicing, the mentor, the printing out stuff, getting books, getting yourself to the test, through the test. All of the preceding videos now are going to be instruction videos and how to complete each task. This is the way the ACF wants you to complete these tasks, the way I'm going to go over it. If you do it different, you're most likely going to get points knocked off and fail. When I practiced, I looked for YouTube videos and couldn't find any on certain things, like how to do an artichoke heart and how to fillet a fish properly. So that's why I've created this video. The one thing these videos will not provide for you are recipes. That is completely up to you to get recipes. You're a chef. You need to come up with your own recipes. It's up to you to create the recipes, complete the components properly, how I'm going to show you how to do the mignon, your rice pilaf, and your different tasks throughout. So now let's go into the different videos. You can always fast forward, rewind, and email me questions on any of the videos as you watch them. So let's move on into the practicing. On an emulsified dressing, you want to start by mixing your stabilizer into the bowl and then adding your balsamic vinegar. You're going to whisk the two together and slowly add in your oils, your olive oil, and if you use another form of oil, mix that in as well, slowly, whisking in a figure 8 fashion and vigorously to emulsify the dressing. The purpose of emulsifying is to break down the molecules and add in air, which causes the different ingredients to stick together rather than separate. The purpose of adding a stabilizer is to cause the emulsification to hold for a certain period of time. So you're going to need a stabilizer for this test. You're going to need a balsamic vinegar, and you're going to need at least one oil, if not more. Suggestion is to use more than just olive oil to help lighten the flavor so it doesn't have a pungent olive oil flavor. This task is going to take several minutes to properly emulsify and stabilize all your ingredients. As you can see, there is no separation. Then you add in any herbs, seasonings that you're going to use for extra added flavor. Again, this task should take several minutes. Your dressing is going to need to hold for 4 to 5 hours. The test is 2.5 hours long. The dressing will sit while you're waiting for the evaluator meeting, so plan on it holding. You're going to want to practice this task and adjust ingredients accordingly ahead of time, and test how long your emulsified dressing will hold ahead of time after you've measured out your ingredients to ensure that it's going to hold for the proper amount of time during the testing. As you can see, you continue to whisk vigorously in a figure 8. This is a properly emulsified dressing. This is a Dijon vinaigrette dressing. And as you can see from this spoonful of dressing, it's properly mixed and holding its emulsification, and will hold its emulsification. With your Medignon, you're going to want to know what cut. Escoffier tells you to use a paysan cut. I've used a dice cut in this video, but most likely you're going to be required to use a paysan cut, which is an easier cut to perform for the test. The things that you want to remember when you're doing your Medignon is you need to have consistency in your cuts. This is a point that they will look at. If you have some cuts that are 1 inch big and some that are 1/4 of an inch, they will look through your ingredients. So you want to practice getting your cuts perfect so they're all consistent. Your ratio for your Medignon, you want to use 4.5 ounces of carrots, 4.5 ounces of onion, and 4.5 ounces of celery, 3.5 ounces of ham, 1 bay leaf, and 1 sprig of thyme. This is going to give you slightly under 2 cups. You're required to have 2 cups prior to finishing, so it will give you slightly under. You can bump your ratios just a little if you need, but this is the ratios Escoffier provides you. You want to start by melting 2 tablespoons of butter in your fry pan. Then you want to put in your carrots, your celery, and your onion and ham. And you need to saute it. Point they're going to watch is it sauteed properly? You need to put in your sprig of thyme and your bay leaf during sauteing from the beginning. And also season your Medignon. They're going to check for proper cooking. You don't want it overcooked where it's a dark brown. You don't want it undercooked. You want to taste it throughout the cooking to make sure that it's properly cooked, because they're going to check for under or overcooked on your Medignon. They're going to check for the flavor of the Medignon. You're going to continue to cook it to the point that it's almost finished. As you can see, the butter is starting to evaporate and the vegetables are becoming opaque. This is a task that you're going to want to watch while you're doing so you don't overcook your mignon. The purpose of the mignon is used as a appetizer or as a topper to cooking a protein. Once your mignon is become almost fully cooked and you've tasted it, as you can see from the video, you're going to move on to deglazing your pan. Continue to make sure it's stirred so it's cooking evenly and fully cooking. And in this video, this is less than 2 cups for a demo purpose. So we sample it again to make sure that it's cooked to the proper consistency. And once it's cooked to the proper consistency, you also want to have a nice display of your mignon for the evaluators. So we're going to deglaze the pan with a white wine, approximately 2 to 3 tablespoons of a white wine to deglaze your pan. You don't want the mignon saturated. It's strictly to deglaze the pan to give it further flavor. And then we're going to take our bay leaf and our sprig of thyme out, and we're going to move our mignon onto the display plate for the evaluators. And that is your mignon. With your rice pilaf, it's similar to your mignon, only you are definitely using a small dice on your rice pilaf. You want to use a ratio of vegetables. You want your onion and your carrots to be the same ratio, and your celery to be less of a ratio than the other 2 ingredients. The ACF will watch your cutting techniques and check for your craftsmanship, which means you need to move at a moderate pace on this task, but you need to make sure your cuts are consistent. You should be practicing your cuts every day leading up to your test to make sure that you have a good cut at a moderate speed with consistency. As you're doing your cut, you can go through, and if there are 1 or 2 pieces of vegetable that are not the same size, pick them out prior to cooking. But you should make your cuts as similar as possible without having to pick out vegetables. Upon finishing your cuts, you're going to want to take a fry pan, stovetop, and melt 2 tablespoons of butter and pour in your vegetables to saute. This procedure is what the ACF expects. They do not expect you to cook your rice pilaf stovetop, but inside an oven. You most likely will get marked down if you cook this rice pilaf in any other manner. You want to have your stove set at 350 degrees. You want to have your chicken stock stove top warming prior to starting. You do not want to pour cold stock into your rice pilaf because it will destroy the cooking. As you're sauteing your vegetables, you want to add in season and bring your season as close to a finished product as possible, continuing to saute your vegetables until they are no longer crunchy, but almost completely finished. After you've finished your vegetables, you're going to mix in your rice, and a white rice works best for this technique. You're going to pour in your rice and saute it slightly to seal it before you pour in your stock. Upon sealing your rice, you're then going to pour in stock. It's going to be 1 cup of rice to 2 cups of stock. And this ratio is required. They will ask you what your ratio is at the test, and you're going to want to know that you're using 1 cup of rice to 2 cups of stock. After you've sealed your rice, you're going to pour in your 2 cups of warm stock, and you're going to stir your ingredients and bring them up to a slight simmer, not a boil, but a simmer. Upon bringing your mixture to a simmer, you can sample the flavor one more time and adjust seasoning, and then place a lid on your mixture and place the entire pan into a 350 degree stove. For 15 minutes, we'll cook your rice pilaf to perfection. And you will remove your rice pilaf after 15 minutes, take off the lid and stir it, and if need be, finally adjust any further seasoning and check the consistency of your pilaf to make sure that it is properly cooked, not undercooked or overcooked. But 15 minutes in a 350 degree oven will have your rice pilaf cooked to perfection if you follow all the preceding steps. And again, upon completion of your rice pilaf, you're going to want to properly display your pilaf, which is required on your final presentation plate to the evaluators. So when you're planning your list of order to do things, you're going to want to make your pilaf one of the final things you do to keep it from overcooking. And this is your rice pilaf. Cooking a 6-ounce strip steak to medium rare. On this task, the main points that the evaluators typically watch are that your steak has a proper sear, it is properly seasoned, and the main focus is that it's cooked to a medium rare state. In order to obtain the medium rare and the proper cooking, you're going to want to season your steak and oil it first, and then cook it on either a charbroil or a flat top to the temperature of 145 degrees in the center. Allow the steak to rest after for 5 minutes in a drip pan with a heat lamp. This will raise the temperature to 155 into a perfect medium rare state. You're going to want to use a thicker strip steak. It works better than the one we are demoing. And you're also going to want to leave some fat on the steak. The evaluators throughout the test need to see that you know how to properly weigh ingredients and product, and the strip steak is the perfect time to do so. Leave some fat on the steak, bring it in at a 8 or 9 ounce portion size, trim the fat off to bring it down to the 6 ounce required portion size, and then cook the steak. If it's not being used for your final plating, you may still need a sauce. It's best to use a sauce on the steak to prevent the evaluator from marking you down. Some evaluators believe that your steak as well as your fish should have a sauce, regardless if it's used for your final plating. So it's best to come up with a good sauce for both items and use a sauce on both items throughout the test in order to have all bases covered. Upon completion of the steak, it should have a perfect red juicy center and a good seared outside, such as the steak that we finished cooking here. When preparing an artichoke, the most difficult part on the ACF test is knowing how to properly prepare it. You want to start with water with lemon in it to keep the artichoke from oxidizing. The ACF does require you to prepare the artichoke as shown in this video. You want to start by cutting approximately the top third of the artichoke off. It is a tougher vegetable to cut. You want to cut a small portion of the stem off. You'll see a white center. You're going to clean down to the white center when you're cleaning your artichoke. You're going to peel the leaves off to get started in order to get your knife on the artichoke better. As you're cleaning, you want to continually dip the artichoke into your lemon bath. This keeps it from oxidizing. Some of the points that evaluators are going to look at are: 1, do you know how to clean the artichoke? 2, do you keep the artichoke from oxidizing? And 3 and 4, is it cooked properly and seasoned properly? You are going to want a larger knife, a smaller paring type knife, a peeler, and a melon baller to clean the artichoke. You're going to clean the stem down to the white part. You do not want to have any green left on the artichoke because it has a wood texture when you bite into it, and it is not pleasant. It's tough to chew. If properly cleaned, it's very tender, should be about the consistency of a baked potato when you're finished. You continually cut down a couple more times on the top part of the artichoke. This will ensure that you don't take off too much of the top. You want to get down to the chalk, which is a purple colored, yellow colored, hairy looking flower in the center that you're going to remove. You do not leave this in either. You're going to use your paring knife to peel around the outside and get the green off and get the entire artichoke down to a yellow portion. When you prepare your artichoke, you're going to want to cook it in a simmering water of about 160 to 180 degrees with some lemon in it. And you are going to want to flavor the water either using a Garnet bouquet or a court bouillon, a vegetable stock, or some flavoring. You do not want to just boil the artichoke in water. It does need to have a flavor. The evaluators will check for flavor as well and proper seasoning on the artichoke. The artichoke needs to be cooked to a state suitable for finishing, depending on the menu description. The examiners, this is a point where you are going to want to ask. A state of finishing could mean that they don't want it fully cooked. A state of finishing could mean they fully want it cooked. If it's fully cooked, it should be about the consistency of a baked potato when you stick a fork in it. You're going to remove the chalk with a melon baller. You're going to continue to work the artichoke by using a melon baller, a peeler, and your knives to bring it all down to the yellow and continually dip it into your lemon water bath. If you do not do this, it will oxidize fast. So you want to dip it frequently. And as you clean all your vegetables and cut off ends on your vegetables and your meat products, you're going to want to have Ziploc bags labeled with what's in them and keep the waste and label them for further use. If you throw out any of your waste, you will get marked down by evaluators. They expect you to keep any carrot, celery, and onion waste to make stocks, and the same with your fish carcass. They expect you to keep that for stock. So you're going to want to keep all of your waste and have it properly labeled, and it's best to have Ziploc bags labeled ahead of time that you bring into the test, and you practice this during your testing to keep all of your waste. And you just continue to clean it down. You do need to have 2 of these prepared for the test, and this is what your finished product should look like prior to cooking. And as stated, you're going to do a simmering lemon water to cook it. It takes approximately 20 minutes to cook your artichoke to a proper state, and check it with a fork to make sure it's cooked properly when you are finished. To properly fillet your flatfish, this is one of the hardest tasks that you are going to possibly do on the ACF test if you have never filleted a flatfish. To properly fillet the flatfish, you want to cut along the bottom portion of the fish, making a slit. You'll want to, after you get a slit made, begin to run your knife along the bones. You want to push hard enough so your filleting knife slightly bends and you can feel it running across the bones, similar to a xylophone when you're running it across, in order to get all the meat off. If you leave any meat on the bones, you will be marked down by the evaluators. They are expecting you to get all the meat off the bones. It is easiest to cut along the bones on a flounder. If you're doing a Dover's sole, you can peel the skin off, but do not attempt that on a flounder. it will not work and you will get marked down. You want to remove the 2 fillets off the top or dark part of your flounder first by running your knife along. You're also going to want to make a slit at the tail and a slit at the head in order to get your fillets to come off the flounder. Once you get a proper technique and a good fillet knife, this task is really easy to do and should not take you that long. It's just practicing it and knowing how to do it, which is the hardest part for most people on the ACF test. And then you cut along the top portion of the fish, and this is removing your first fillet. Then you flip the fish and you cut along the head on the bottom portion of the fish, and then you go along the top of the bottom portion of the fish. The white part is the bottom of the fish. And again, you run your knife along the bones. You need to run your knife along the bones, pushing hard in order to get the meat off on the bottom, because the bottom is thinner than the top. You need to keep in mind, you can remove a bone or two later if you cut a bone off into the fillet. You can't add more meat onto your fillet if you leave it behind. So this is why it's crucial to push on the bone while you're filleting the flounder. This will most likely be the longest task to your test. It's best to allot enough time for this task in order to ensure that you fully do the flounder perfect and get all the meat off. And again, you want to keep the carcass from the flounder. If you throw it in the trash, you will be marked down for wasting product. You can use the flounder carcass to make a stock later. You're going to want to have your flounder gutted prior to the test. You can have it gutted. Do not have it filleted. You have to have the head on, but you can have it gutted, which will make your filleting a lot easier than cutting through the sacks within the gut area. So this is 2 fillets. This is the flounder cleaned. As you can see through the bones. Now to get the fillets off the skin, it's easiest to use a larger, firmer knife with a stiffer spine and just push right along the skin with your knife angled. Some prefer to grab the skin and just pull the fillet along and it takes it right off. Others prefer to just have the knife flat with the table or cutting board to get the fillets off. As the flatfish does not have a lot of meat to begin with, you need to ensure you get all the meat off the bones and all the meat off the skin. The skin can be tricky. So you should have 4 fillets that you're going to use to prepare for your test when you're finished. When you begin to prepare the 4 fillets, again, these are small fillets. You're going to want to get a larger flounder like we used for the actual cooking demo in this video. On the cooking demo, you need to poach the fish in a shallow poach. You need to start with parchment paper and fold it, and you're going to cut it the size of your pan. This is the proper poaching technique. You want to line it up on the edge of your pan with the point to the center and then cut off the excess parchment. And then cut off the center of the parchment to leave a little hole in the center for poaching. It should fit perfectly on your pan, just like a lid, slightly smaller than a lid. Next, you need to butter your parchment paper This is to keep the parchment from sticking to your fish when you're poaching it. This is the proper technique expected by the ACF. After butting your parchment, set it to the side, and you want to put your cooking liquid into your pan, which is going to depend on your recipe. You're going to want to roll your fish into papier in order to cook them and get them to cook properly, or they'll be dry if you just try to cook them as fillet. Thing to remember with papier, skin in. You always want to have the skin side of the fish in. You want to start rolling with the largest side, moving toward the smallest pointy portion or tail side of the fish when you're rolling your papier. And you put a toothpick in them, and then you want a large enough pan for poaching as we cut our parchment paper to. Fill your pan so it comes approximately halfway up to slightly a quarter of a way over your papier. You want to bring your cooking liquid to a temperature of 160 degrees. Place your papier into the center of the pan, and then you're going to cover them with the parchment paper with the butter side down on top of the fish. Your cooking should take approximately 10 to 12 minutes to poach the fish. This is the proper poaching technique. You need to use a shallow poach. If you use a deep poach, you'll be marked down. You're going to need to flavor your poaching liquid, and you're going to need to make a sauce for your fish if you are using it for your final product. Some evaluators again will require a sauce if this is being used for any portion of the test, which it's required, so it is. So it's to your advantage to have a sauce for your flounder or flatfish as well as your steak in order to cover all bases through the test and not get marked down. I found it helpful when I tested to make a sauce for my fish and a sauce for my steak, even though they only require a sauce typically for one item. And you're going to temp your fish at 145 degrees. Again, you do not want to just cook the fillet or they'll be dry. The papier are going to keep it from getting dry. Your poaching water needs to be 160, your fish 145 when properly cooked all the way through. Once finished, you're going to remove your fish, plate them, and remove the toothpicks that you use to keep your papier from falling apart. Do not leave the toothpick in, and make sure you properly garnish your fish when you are finished. And this is your properly poached fish. I hope this video was helpful in you reaching your certification as an American Culinary Federation chef. And remember, if you have any questions, do not hesitate to email me.